Hello again and welcome to the channel. Thank you for joining me. It's been a while since my last update as I've been waiting on various parts to come through and I had some bad news last week. My gran on my mum's side passed away last Sunday and I've been obviously preoccupied and a little busy, mind elsewhere kind of stuff, and I had to go and visit my mum to make sure she was okay, yeah, it's not a pleasant time. It was a long-standing illness. She had lung cancer, and in the end, she died with friends and family around her, and was at peace at last without any pain. So, you know, glad for small mercies, but again, it's something that nobody enjoys. Nobody goes through something like that and expects to come out of it the other end okay. So relatively speaking, I'm doing all right, but I thought I'd leave it a few days before doing a video so that the emotions weren't quite as raw, and we could get back to keeping my mind on other things like building this shed. So, where are we at the minute? Well, I've got the differential back from the engineers. They turned down the diameter here to 45mm exactly on both sides, so that I can now get pillow block bearings for here, and then mount that onto a cradle of whatever design I decide to make, bolted to the engine and the firewall. And the brace underneath as well. I haven't ordered the pillar blocks yet. I'm waiting to be able to afford a drive shaft inner CVs so that I can test fit them in the diff, and make sure that I've got enough depth on here to fit the drive shafts through, so that I don't have to order custom pillar blocks. Because that would be a pain in the backside. So that's on hold at the minute. What I did do is, as some of you saw on Instagram and the Facebook group, I ordered a sprocket. That sprocket there is the correct size. However, with the spacings that are in here and the bolt holes had been in the wrong place, the PCD of the sprocket being in the wrong place, there's not enough material on here to make it fit this diff without having a machined adapter in the middle, which would be added expense and weight. And to be quite honest, even though this is steel, I don't think this would last very long. It wouldn't be strong enough. So what I've done, I've ordered a blank, what they call a plate wheel. So this is the correct, it's the same diameter as this, same teeth. If I line that up on there, so it's identical as far as size and sprockets go. The one thing it isn't is the correct thickness. So the gauge of the chain is different. This is around 5.5mm thick. That's not focused, is it? Anyway, it's 5.5mm thick-ish, give or take half a mil or two. This is nearly 7.5mm thick. However, as you'll be able to see on here and around, there's no holes in it. It's blank. This is solid steel here. What would happen is, obviously, once I get the markings on it and want to measure it out, this goes on a lathe. They lathe it down, take the centre out to that circle there. That circle is the inner circle on here, which fits perfectly around the inner section of the diff. So it fits within like a millimetre of the inner surface of the diff. So that circle there will be machined out and all the centre will disappear. And then obviously we'll have the bolt holes drilled to match here. And then it will be nut and bolt through here with locking bolts and thread lock and all sorts on there just to stop it coming undone. Then what we'll have to do is machine it thinner. So yes, there's an angle on here. There's an angle on there that allows the chain to smoothly slip, or each link of the chain to smoothly slip over each one of these teeth. So the outside diameter here would be exactly as it is there. It would stay the same. And the inner, they would have to make it thinner. If I can get this one next to that one, you can see there how much different they are. So this one would have to be machined thinner. Again, not a massive problem on a lathe, because you obviously just spin the lathe up and cut the surface down. But like I say, this sprocket here, ready-made as it is in steel, was about 20 quid. I'll be selling that once I'm finished with using it for measurements of the diameters and everything. So that will be sold on for a tenner or two. This one was £11. It's Dunlop. It's made of hardened steel, so they may need to use a carbide bit to get the to skim it. But yeah, it's. I mean, what can you do? It's either this or, you know, just give up and don't do it. So this is what I'm doing. What I've done, I've marked out. I traced on this bit of paper here. What I did first, okay, was line up the sprockets. So I know for a fact that 2 of these bolt holes lined up like so, that one and that one, puts this exactly in the centre. And because that hole in the middle slips over the top of the centre, what I used is these 2 holes and lined the teeth up on here perfectly. So they're now lined up. Okay, so lined the teeth up on the sprocket, scribed around the circle so it left a scribe mark where the centre is. Okay, then used 2 of these holes opposite each other to mark out the first 2 holes, first 2 positions. Once I did that, I got this piece of paper, put it on the other side of the diff, obviously, and used my finger, my dirty finger, to mark out all of the bolt holes for the diff. So that's got the PCD of the diff on it. In order to get the centre hole in here, I've used the left side of each one of the bolt holes, because I don't 100% know where the centres are on these yet. Use the left side to the right side, so when you spin it round, it's always on the left side of the hole. Drew a straight line with my straight edge, and where they intersected in the middle is the exact centre of what would be the diff, and obviously would be the sprocket. I then used a Christmas tree bit, which is one of these here, which self-centers in that hole. Once it drops down to the correct size, it self-centers in the hole. I was able to place the template over the top, center punch through the center mark in the paper, and then get a hole in the center of the paper. So that was then centered correctly over the sprocket. I then placed the other sprocket back over the correct teeth and lined it up. So you can see it's lined up there. And well, it was lined up there. Obviously, there's a different. I've moved it since then, but those 2 were lined up. I used a drill bit of the correct size, which I think is 12mm on there. Put it in the hole, pushed it down, and made a mark on the paper. So that hole is then centered within the mounting holes on here. Are you following so far? Okay, so we now have a dimple in the center of these. The holes are in the correct place for 2 of the holes, and we have a center point. So you put the center point in the middle. You line up the paper to the sprocket over the top, and you use an automatic center punch, one of these. I'll show you one here, to put a small mark. Can't even see that, can you? That mark just there, okay, in the metal. So that marks the 2 positions for the first holes. Then what we do is we grab the sprocket and we rotate it around to the next points on here, the next dirty marks, okay, and we line it up. We make sure that it's still on this circle, and we line it up perfectly with the outside circle here, which is the PCD of the diff. Rotate it round, put the drill bit in, mark the paper, centre punch, rotate it round, and we keep doing that until we've got all 10. I think it's 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, 10 holes. So we got all 10 holes, or all 10 marks in the plate wheel here. Little apprentice mark there where I've cocked up. Then what I've done is I've used my digital calipers to measure from the edge of this centre hole to the edge of this circle, all the way around, to make sure it's concentric with the centre hole. So that is definitely in the middle, all the way around. I then measured from the centre of the pin punch to the edge of no, it wasn't. It was to the edge of here, because me calipers wouldn't stretch that far. So from this line to the centre of there, which is, I believe it was 4.62 millimeters or something similar. So then measured that all the way around and made sure that they were all the same distance from that circle. And that should be the PCD of the diff. So they should just need to drill those holes out in, I think that's a 12, like I say, I think that's a 12 mil hole. But they'll make it the correct size for whatever bolts I'm going to be using. Then it's just a case of taking it to a machine shop and get it machined, which isn't going to be for a while because it's bloody expensive getting stuff machined. So we'll do that. I'll let them not double check, but I will give them the correct dimensions of the diff to make sure it's drilled in the correct locations. Hopefully, it doesn't matter if I mark this edge up. Like I say, if they're going to be making it thinner, they may as well make it thinner on this side and just face it and just go over put it in a chuck, in a lathe, spin it up and face this end. So even if I've made some marks in there, they're going to disappear anyway. And then I'll let them line it up and mill it so it's the correct size. Hopefully get some bloody weight out of this thing because it weighs a ton. So, what's next? Let's put this over there. The next thing I've done, or the next thing I've got, should I say, is this. This is what I've been waiting for since I bought the engine. We've got a gasket here, which is just a metal gasket. It's a genuine Kawasaki one, so I found loads of them online, loads of different ones, paper ones and wax-coated ones. This is actually a metal gasket, so I'll probably put a thin layer of RTV sealant around the edge of this cover. The cover itself, it says magnesium. The weight of this thing, and with it being from the good old boys over in China, I don't think that's magnesium. I think it's aluminium. It weighs too much to be magnesium, and the cost of it as well. There's no way it was magnesium. It's the correct colour. There are some sharp flashing marks where it's been moulded, which I'll need to nip off so I don't cut myself when I'm putting it on. And it looks like it's been used before as well, so I don't think it's a genuine one, but I think it's one that's been tested. Or, I mean, it's just a cover. It's a cover that you stick the idler sprocket for the starter motor, the drive pin for it sits in there, and then this is filled with oil. This is the electronics I've been waiting for, which is the stator. Now, this is what I was talking about with the stator. It bolts into the cover through 4 of the 6 bolt holes, so they line up. And then you have the flywheel on the bike spins around the outside of it, generating electricity, much like your alternator in your car, but this is built into the engine, so it's also filled with oil as well. The one reason I can't get oil in the bike and start it up is because the big gaping hole on the side and the fact it doesn't have a stator on it. The other thing I need before I put this on is all the bolts to bolt it in, the 4 bolts to hold the stator to the cover, and the one huge bolt, which I think's like it looks like a 22 mil head big thick bolt that holds the flywheel in, so the opposite end of this that holds the flywheel in. So none of those bolts I got with the engine. So luckily, again, you can get them online, but I'm buying things piece by piece rather than just making a huge order. We've also got here this wire with nothing on the end of it, which is the other end of the kickstand switch, which I've bypassed, so that can be got rid of. And this green one here, which is important because that plugs into the neutral switch and goes through the plug. So that's what I've been bypassing on the bike with a little bit of wire tucked into an earth cable. This one here, okay? So obviously that's on the back end of the plug here, and once the stator is plugged in, I can then use that cable and plug it into the neutral switch, which was under there. Okay, so that's the parts that I've got. I've also been working on the car itself whilst I've been waiting on these parts. Not done a lot because I've once again run out of welding wire, so I'm waiting for some welding wire to come through. I've been welding in the roll cage feet, and the reason I've been doing it is because, well, if I mess it up and get it wrong, they can be cut out and it can be done again. It's not a major problem. There is massive gaps from the safety devices roll cage fitting kit is questionable fitment. Let's put it that way. It's not snug. It doesn't fit right. There's massive gaps. However, I've been trying to get it to fit as best I can, and then welding it in place, grinding it back, making sure obviously all the welds are solid, and then you know, I will be painting the interior again with white, and then going over all the pinholes and everything that I've created. I've also started covering up all the old trim holes and drainage holes and stuff in the floor pan with some aluminium foil tape. That's just to stop water and stones and stuff getting into the car from underneath. And again, they will be painted over the top of primer and then paint. The other thing I've done, I stole one of the struts off the boot lid. I was fed up of constantly taking out the bonnet strut when I wanted to close the bonnet and lift it up, close the bonnet and lift it up, because it doesn't have a home anymore. Yes, it sits in here, which that will be getting rid of, but when it lays across the front, it just droops around and flaps around. There's nothing to hold it in, and to be quite honest, it just gets in the way. So with this, I can open and close the bonnet with one hand, which I couldn't do before. I needed two hands. I needed to put stuff down. I needed, obviously, because this strut never lived in the engine bay, I had to put it on the floor somewhere or put it back on the shelf and try and find somewhere to... It's just crap anyway. So I pinched one of the struts off the boot lid. The boot lid, now, it won't hold itself open with one strut because it's still quite heavy. However, at some point I'm going to be replacing the back window with Perspex or Lexan or polycarbonate or whatever you want to call it. There is a company out there that makes them. I can just order some flat bits of polycarbonate, which is about half the price, and then cut them out myself. But if they're pre-cut, I can just glue them in. So I'll be replacing the back window with polycarbonate and then cutting out all of the interior metal from the boot lid, including the latch and all the handles and everything, and just leaving two little lights in there for the number plate. And the one strut should be more than enough to lift the boot lid then. So at the moment, yes, it's a little weak, on the weak side, and it won't hold itself up. However, the bonnet, what I've done, I've riveted the bracket to the inner wing here, so it's into the metal of the inner wing. It's then riveted into the bonnet just here, and well, there we go, and it closes, and yes, it latches too. So it's not banging up against anything. It doesn't catch on anything, but what it does do is allow me to raise the bonnet up on its own. Job done. I don't need a strut anymore. So that's one job sorted. And you know, if anybody else wants to do it, it is. You mean you can still order these online. You can get a brand new one if you want. But the reason I've used an old one instead of a brand new one is two reasons. One was to test it out to make sure it works, and there was enough gas in here to lift the bonnet, which there is. The other reason was older ones tend to be less powerful or have less force behind them than newer ones, which means this is easier to close than if it was a brand new one. So if it was a brand new one, what would happen is obviously I would pull on the front of the bonnet, this wouldn't move, it would just bend the front of the bonnet over, or it would open so quickly that it risks bending the bonnet at the back. This is kind of perfectly worn out, if that makes sense. It's perfect. It's the perfect amount of force behind it to close it nice and gently and open it slowly as well. So spot on. If you want to do it yourself, like I said, the best way of doing it is order some brand new ones for your boot lid, or a brand new one for your boot lid off eBay, and use one of the old ones on your bonnet. And that way you can get rid of your bonnet stay. You can get rid of the little catches down there that hold it on, get rid of this bit, and just clean the front of the engine bay. I say clean the engine, look at the state of this, but you can clean the front of the engine bay up and get rid of, you know, a bonnet strut. There's nothing there now to stop me from working around the car, whereas before there was a big strut here that just got in the way. Anyway, that's most modern cars have gone this way with struts, so that's that. The only modification I had to make to the car, which isn't really to the car, it's to these fiberglass wings, was just nip off the edge of this, the fiberglass mount here. It's still solid in there, it's still like 5mm of fiberglass, and it's not really structural because there's three other bolts holding the wing on, plus it's bolted to the bumper down here and the headlight. So it's just a locating bolt, but I've just trimmed it off there so that the main body of the strut sits on this section of inner wing, and it does fit perfectly well. It doesn't hit anything, and it's not rubbing, so I'm happy with that. I'm proud. The other thing I've done, obviously you can see here, I've temporarily mounted the front slam panel on, and the reason I've done that, twofold. First thing, I need to measure where the radiator's going to go, that one, whether or not it's going to fit in here. And I will need to remove the latch latch plate here because it hits the engine cover. Only just though. I could probably bend it and get it out of the way, but it also butts up against the back of the grille here as well. So I'll lop that off. And I mean, I will make another slam panel because this one's got so many holes in it. It looks like Swiss cheese at the minute, and it's about as much as structural as a wet noodle. So it does nothing. What it does do though, the second thing it does, is to pull this headlight cluster section over that way by about 3 or 4mm. And what that also does is create a tiny little gap around here so that the front wing fits properly. And it's, like I say, it's minor. It's only a tiny little thing, but if it wasn't there, that headlight would be too far over and the wing would be too far over, and it wouldn't fit the bumper properly. You can see here, it fits in line. The bumper fits in line with, yes, it's bubbled out, but it fits in line with the wing, with the headlight snug up against the fiberglass there. There is a gap there. It's not butted up against it, but there is a tiny little gap down there. But if it, like I say, if this wasn't in to pull this metal section over, the headlight wouldn't fit properly and the wing wouldn't fit properly. So that's why it's necessary on this car. May not be necessary on yours because you won't have large chunks of your front panel missing. So like I say, I will be making a custom one of these. I'll be getting rid of the latch up here, so the metal pieces on this, I'll be cutting them out and getting rid because I don't need them because I've got the bonnet pins. I'll be getting rid of this section here because again I don't need it, and then I'll probably make a piece out of aluminium or even steel, to be honest. I've got some steel, so make a piece out of steel or aluminium that goes across here and then has the correct mounting holes in it. That's where the radiator cap used to go when it had the turbo engine in it, for the radiator. So I'll stick the radiator back in it I'll take this off, put the radiator down there, put this brace on the top, and see whether or not it still lines up. If it doesn't, I'm going to have to find somewhere to bung the radiator across the front here, maybe diagonally, maybe sideways in here somewhere, or wherever it needs to go. If it doesn't fit and it doesn't go in, the other option is to get a Kawasaki ZX9R radiator from the bike, and fit it down there between the bumper and the engine. The problem is they're curved this way, so there may be some trimming of the back of the bumper just down there to get the end tanks in, and then the pipes, all these pipes should line up fairly well. I mean, this one here is rubbing against here, so that will need to be, well, I can slide this tube back over that, so it's not going to rub through it, and then I can protect it a bit more as well. Maybe put a P-clip on there to stop it from moving and rubbing, and then run the pipe to the top of the radiator, and the bottom hose comes out. Where's the bottom hose? It's down here, so that's the bottom hose just there. So that should line up with the ZX9R radiator as well. And like I said before, I will be getting rid of these extra coolant lines for the carburetors. Whew. Mouthful, I know. Lots of work, or not a lot of work been done, but a lot of planning and parts ordering, and just making sure that I get everything correct, so that I don't end up having to redo stuff twice, 3, 4, 5 times, because that's where you end up with projects going on and on and on, is where you don't plan something and you do it from the seat of your pants, and you end up with a mismatch of different ideas, and one idea may not necessarily fit with the next one, and you have to go back to the start and replace it again. That's just, it's a recipe for disaster, and it starts costing a lot more money as well. So this is where this car started off, with a turbo engine and an SR20, and then it had a 1.3, then I swapped it for a 1.4, then I've took the 1.4 out and gone with a motorbike engine. When I decided to go to motorbike engine, I wrote down the process, I wrote down the pros and cons of having a bike engine in there, and I decided that's it. This is the last time the engine's going to be swapped in this, unless I go for a bigger bike engine, but it is going to be a bike engine. It is going to be in the front, and then this is it. This is the direction the car is going. No more swapping it. No 2-litre turbos, no micro engines anymore, although it can be reversed back to a micro engine because there's no permanent changes done yet. But yeah, no micro engines, no Primera engines or anything like that. It is what it is, and this is the way it's staying. So thank you for joining me. I know it's been slightly long-winded and a little bit more, that's what I'm looking for, a little bit more in-depth than my usual have a look at this videos. But I appreciate you joining me, and I appreciate you getting to the end of the video. And I do love people asking me questions on the Facebook page, and also down in the comments section down below. If you would like to support the build and help me crack on and get it started, get it running, get the drive shafts and everything sorted, so I can get it out on the racetrack, then yeah, you can do that on Patreon. You can do that on YouTube. You can do that through Facebook if you wish. Any way you wish to do that. The best way of doing it is to like, subscribe, and share the video as much as you can. And I shall see you next time. Thank you very much for joining me.